Something happened at Watkins Glen International on May 10, 2026, that the entire NASCAR world is still talking about. And it goes far beyond the race results. Two stories came out of that weekend that have fans, drivers, and insiders completely divided. One involves a violent crash that somehow never brought out a caution flag. The other involves a two-time champion quietly suffering inside his race car, asking for a doctor over team radio, while battling through one of the most physically demanding road courses on the schedule. Both stories matter. Both stories reveal something real about where NASCAR stands right now in the 2026 season. So let's get into it. All of it, from the beginning. With 10 laps to go in the Go Bowling at the Glen, Cody Ware was running just inside the top 20, mixing it up in traffic through turn 6. He found himself 3 wide, wedged on the far outside next to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. as Daniel Suarez and Kyle Larson pushed through on the inside. There was contact. Ware's number 51 Rick Ware racing car got turned sideways, tagged the right rear fender of the number 47, and then hooked violently hard, right directly into the tire barrier at the entrance of the final corner. The telemetry data confirmed the impact speed, 93 miles per hour. The car didn't just brush the barrier, it absolutely destroyed it. Photos taken from the infield after the race showed the Armco wall visibly bent inward from the force of the collision. After slamming the tire pack, Ware's car shot back out onto the racing surface and came to a complete stop, sitting exposed and vulnerable on an active racetrack, with cars still running at full speed. Ware radioed his team, "Need help." According to data reviewed after the race, NASCAR waited 34.7 seconds after the impact before finally responding. No caution flag came out. Ware eventually got the car rolling again, limped it to pit road. The team attempted repairs, but the damage was simply too severe. The number 51 was parked. The team posted on X, "Too damaged to continue." The 51 is in the garage. What made this situation even more alarming was how little of it the television audience actually saw. Fox Sports, which was broadcasting the race, caught only the tail end of Ware's damaged car, sitting off to the side of the track. There was no replay of the actual crash. There was no explanation of what happened. There was no real-time analysis of the severity. In fact, in the post-race period, it emerged that Fox had given more airtime to a flying tent in the infield than it did to one of the hardest impacts of the entire race weekend. Fan footage and alternate camera angles only began surfacing online hours after the checkered flag flew, and when people finally saw the onboard footage, the reaction was immediate and furious. This wasn't an isolated broadcasting miss either. Throughout the race, Fox failed to capture the full story on multiple incidents. Bubba Wallace getting spun by John Hunter Nemechek into turn 1 was shown mid-spin with no context on how it started. Josh Berry's late race incidents with Cole Custer were either missed or shown without explanation. And Kyle Busch running out of fuel on the final lap, a moment that cost him a potential top 5 finish, aired too late for viewers to fully understand what they were watching. NASCAR addressed the "no caution" call publicly through its Holler Talk podcast, and through Brad Moran, the managing director for the Cup Series, during his weekly appearance on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. "Just to give you a view from the tower, the 51 wrecked out of 6th there," Moran explained. "The 51 made significant contact and stopped near the tire pack at the restart zone. He did drive away within seconds, so the caution did not come out. We weren't going to throw it at that point unless debris came off the car." Race director Tim Berman, according to NASCAR's own account, did not see the crash happen in real time. He was told by a spotter that there had been an incident in turn 6. By the time Berman switched his monitor to that section of the track, Ware was already driving away. The spotter then confirmed the track was clear. Based on that information, NASCAR kept the race green. The problem with that explanation is that the wall was broken. In NASCAR, a damaged barrier draws a caution in virtually every case, not because the car is still on track, but because the structural integrity of the racing surface has been compromised. Every other car that passed through that section of turn 7 for the remaining 10 laps was running beside a bent, damaged wall. That is not a green flag situation by any standard that NASCAR has historically applied. NASCAR does acknowledge this and has since committed to exploring new technology Specifically, the sanctioning body is looking at using the new ECU system, which begins deployment this season, to immediately transmit the severity of crash impacts directly to the race control tower. The goal is to give officials real-time data on how hard a car has been hit, independent of what any spotter reports or what any monitor happens to be showing at that exact moment. The precedent for why this matters already exists in NASCAR's own recent history. During a NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series practice session at the 2024 Chicago Street Race, Justin Allgaier crashed into a tire pack and became immobilized in what officials believed was a blind spot on the track. The race stayed green. Most of the field passed by safely, but Allende ran the corner wide and hit the side of Allgaier's stationary car approximately 15 seconds later in a crash that totaled both vehicles. Both drivers were fortunate to walk away. A delayed caution, or no caution at all, creates exactly that kind of exposure, and Watkins Glen came dangerously close to the same outcome. Denny Hamlin, the driver of the number 11 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota and co-host of the Actions Detrimental podcast, did not mince words when addressing the situation publicly. They didn't follow a few wrecks for sure, Hamlin said it of the Fox broadcast, but NASCAR has to get better with that. Like, I've seen their control center at their production studio. There's absolutely no excuse to not, you have cameras pointing in every direction of this racetrack for you not to see Cody Ware destroyed in that final corner. Holy cow, man. Hamlin went further, pushing back directly against the standard corporate response that typically follows these controversies. They need to say something about that, not just, we'll look at it, we're always looking to improve. That's old news. Take some accountability on this one. This was not acceptable at all. It is worth noting that Hamlin has personal history with Ware at this track. Just weeks before Watkins Glen at Kansas Speedway, Ware spun out on his own in the closing laps, drawing a caution that ultimately cost Hamlin the race victory. So Hamlin's frustration with the situation is layered, but his criticism of NASCAR and Fox on this specific call was shared widely across the garage and the fan base. The no caution call at Watkins Glen also did not happen in a vacuum. The 2026 season has shown a clear pattern of NASCAR race control hesitating to throw cautions in the closing stages of events when drivers are able to continue moving. The final lap of the 2026 Daytona 500 saw a major multi-car incident in Turn 1 that collected over a dozen cars, and the race stayed green. Chase Elliott and Ty Dillon crashed while taking the white flag at Bristol Motor Speedway. The race stayed green. Kyle Busch punted John Hunter Nemechek in Turn 3 with 2 laps to go at Texas Motor Speedway. The race stayed green. The philosophy of letting racing settle under green conditions is not inherently wrong, and in most of those cases, the call was defensible. But Watkins Glen, with 10 laps remaining and a structurally compromised barrier, was a different category of situation entirely. Now to the story that has NASCAR fans genuinely worried about one of the sport's most recognizable figures. During the final stage of the Go Bowling at the Glen, Kyle Busch came over his team radio in a calm, measured but clearly drained voice, and made a request that immediately caught the attention of everyone monitoring the number 8 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet. Can somebody try to find Bill Heisel? Tell him I need him after the race, Busch said. I'm going to need a shot. NBC sports reporter Dustin Long confirmed the radio message and provided context. Dr. William Heisel has extensive experience working with NASCAR teams, drivers, and pit crew members across many years in the sport. FSONA later clarified during the broadcast that Busch had been battling a serious sinus cold all week. Medical professionals have noted that the high G-forces and significant elevation changes that characterize a road course like Watkins Glen can dramatically worsen sinus conditions, creating intense sinus pressure and pain during competition. What makes the story remarkable is what Busch did despite all of that. He started the race 21st. He finished stage 1 outside the top 20. He looked like he was heading for another forgettable afternoon in what has already been a deeply frustrating 2026 campaign. But the RCR team made adjustments. Busch found speed in Stage 2, finished 5th in the stage, and then used smart fuel-saving strategy in the final stage to climb through the field and stay competitive, while other drivers faded. He came within seconds of a top 5 finish. On the white flag lap, Busch's car began running on fumes through the final 2 corners. Tyler Reddick passed him for 5th going into the final corner. Austin Dillon and AJ Allmendinger then passed him on the front stretch as the checkered flag flew. He was still classified 8th, his best finish of the entire 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season, and Bill Lickey gave him a friendly push back to the pits afterward. Busch acknowledged the situation after the race. Strong day for the number 8 Zone Jalapeno Lime Chevrolet team. We were a top 10 car for the majority of the race and ended 8th here at Watkins Glen International. We made the adjustments and strategy calls we needed to drive forward and make up track position after qualifying 21st, despite battling a car that trended tight throughout the race. We ran out of fuel at the end of the race, but we're still going home with our second top 10 finish of the season. But the conversation around Kyle Busch in 2026 extends well beyond one strong weekend. His winless streak has now surpassed 100 races, with his last Cup Series victory dating back to 2023. This season has featured multiple emotional radio exchanges. Frustration over car setups at Martinsville, the collision with John Hunter Nemechek at Texas, and consistent anger over speed, strategy, and execution at RCR. Reports from within the garage that some members of the number 8 crew have grown emotionally exhausted from the constant tension surrounding the team. Kevin Harvick has publicly suggested that Busch may have limited options outside of Richard Childress Racing moving forward, which adds a significant layer of pressure to a partnership that is already visibly strained. At 41 years old, Kyle Busch is not finished as a racing driver. His performance at Watkins Glen, sick and starting deep in the field, proved that the ability is still there. But the context around him has changed dramatically. During his years at Joe Gibbs Racing, the frustration on the radio almost always preceded a victory. The team could absorb the emotion because trophies followed. At RCR in 2026, the victories are not coming, and the same emotional intensity now carries a very different weight. Every radio outburst becomes a headline, every average finish deepens the scrutiny, and a quiet request for a doctor in the closing laps of a race at Watkins Glen becomes a moment the entire sport stops to examine. Meanwhile, Shane Van Gisbergen won the race, his 7th career Cup Series victory, in another dominant road course performance for Trackhouse Racing. Van Gisbergen credited crew chief Stephen Doran for the strategy calls that allowed him to run down the leaders late. We weren't very good in practice, and then qualifying was amazing. Good tweaks, and then today. What a race car, he said after the checkered flag. Michael McDowell finished 2nd, Ty Gibbs 3rd, Chase Briscoe 4th, and Tyler Reddick 5th. SVG's road course mastery is becoming one of the defining storylines of the 2026 season. Though at Watkins Glen, it was almost entirely buried beneath the controversy. That may be the most accurate summary of where NASCAR finds itself right now in 2026. The racing is real, the competition is fierce, but the mistakes, officiating failures, broadcasting gaps, emotional breakdowns, and safety concerns are generating as much conversation as anything happening on track. NASCAR has publicly committed to addressing the technology gap that allowed Cody Ware's crash to go unrecognized in real time. But commitments and corrections are two different things. The 2026 season will determine which one NASCAR actually delivers. Like, subscribe, share this with every NASCAR fan right now. Comment below. Is Kyle Busch finished at RCR? See you next time.